access to a creek or a runoff or something, and it's eroding away. So,
And welcome to the City Council Study Session meeting of Tuesday, August 20th, 2024. There's one item on the agenda, and that's discussion regarding Resolution 2425-34, postponed in City Council's meeting of August 13th, 2024, related to the Oklahoma Turnpike Authority's Access Program. I'll leave the floor to you.
Great. Hi, my name is Amy Serrato. I'm a professional civil engineer, and I've been fighting with the Oklahoma Turnpike Authority for the last 2.5 years and learning all we can about their past, the history and what they are planning on doing. And so I wanted to come tonight and speak to you about what I feel is important for the city of Norman to understand before you even consider doing a resolution. My preference would be no resolution, but I know that there's people in the room that want to think about that, so I'm going to give you some pieces of nuggets that you can use while you're thinking about what to go into that resolution. So my presentation is around 15 minutes, and then Rob's going to take over. So what I'm going to talk about is broken promises and the repetitive playbook. So you can understand, I'm going to use Oklahoma County as an example and the Creek Turnpike and Jenks as an example for you to understand that when the OTA has approached municipalities before to ask them for a resolution, they have done nothing that they've said they were going to do, and they're going to do what they want, and it's even worse than that. In that, sometimes you have to take them to court just to get them to do what they're statutorily required to do. What I want to talk about too is the protection of the environment. The OTA has been non-compliant, defiant, and has unfulfilled commitments. They're not required to produce real environmental impact statements unless they have a federal nexus. So it's really imperative of the city of Norman to let them know what you want in that floodplain and in your wetlands. And they've created some destructive unresolved flooding on several turnpikes I'll show you some pictures of. They're still in litigation right now, and they're refusing to fix the problems. The protection of citizens, so eminent domain practices. They're not required to use the Uniform Relocation Act, and a majority of all the properties that have been taken in the last 5 years have gone to court. And the average give to those displaced families is about 50% of fair market value. When they take them to court and get a new settlement, it's often 500 to 600% of what their original offer was. But poor people can't take them to court because they don't have any money. So I want to explain to you the eminent domain practice and what that means for our lower income families that will be displaced. Remember, this is the largest eminent domain take in the state of Oklahoma. So thousands of people will be displaced, and they'll be displaced within 90 days. So keep that in mind if that's important to you. And I want to reaffirm, if you decide by the end of this that you really want to do a resolution, then I want to make it clear that we should reaffirm the city's opposition to the turnpikes while still preparing for the possibility of a turnpike. And there's a special way that we can do that that doesn't give up our ability to negotiate with the OTA or with the state legislature on fixing the Enabling Act, which we have to do. So the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. So let's talk about Oklahoma County, and those of you who sat through Kelly Wilson's presentation on Sunday have a little bit of background on this, but I'm going to try to take an hour presentation and knock it down to 3 slides. So the city of Norman is going through the same exact thing that Oklahoma County went through back in 2016. So remember, OTA approached us. No one in this room knew we were going to have a turnpike, right? No one came and said, do you want one? Where do you want it? They did that to them up in the Kickapoo. They had moved forward through the design plans, didn't give you a no-build option, didn't give you an alternative option, which all civil engineering projects, mega projects we call them, have to have at least 3 alternative routes and a no-build option. That is federally required. But guess what? The OTA is not have to follow federal regulations because they use bond money, not federal regulations. So to come through with one mega project and not give a no-build option is completely the antithesis to how the federal highway says you should design civil engineering projects. And so then when the OTA design plans are almost 60%, they came to Oklahoma County and said, we would need a resolution. And so Oklahoma County said, we only have 15 days to do this. We don't know what we should do. So they came up with this really simple resolution. And the gist of it was that OTA would buy all the right of way. They would gift it to the Oklahoma County for all the service roads. And then the city would, or the county would be in charge of all the maintenance. And then they wanted it to say it was a reflection of a partnership. So 3 things. And so similar to what we're going through right now. The 3 weeks for a signed resolution, they're giving you 4 weeks to come up with it. And they're saying, if you don't do this, we're not gonna give you what you want. And I'm here to tell you that the OTA is gonna provide all the access points because they want to. Because without access points, they don't make any money. They're relying on more than 50% of their revenue to come from local access. They want this to be the Kilpatrick. So whether you say you want an access at 48th or 36th, they're gonna put it there anyway, because that's where their people have told them that they're gonna make the most money. So you don't have to negotiate that, they're just gonna do it, because that's what they want. You can't negotiate with them right now, because you don't even have a full route design. So how are you supposed to come up and tell them you want a multimodal path or environmental mitigation when you don't have information about where the southern extension will be or where that middle part of the east-west connector will be? You have to design these things like a system. They can't be designed piecemeal. And so I'm really encouraging you to wait until you see where this full route is and you see that they have federal permissions before you go through with this partnership resolution. The deadline is arbitrary. They're 60%. 60% is their playbook to when they can start to acquire eminent domain property right of way. And so if you partner right now, you're relieving us of our power to further negotiate and make lasting legislative changes, because the legislators are gonna look and say, oh, the city said they're partnering. Why do you want to change the Enabling Act to protect future generations? And this is their playbook over and over. So while unfortunately we may get a turnpike at some point, I'd like to stop it from ever happening again. I don't want my kids to ever have to go through this. And we have to have the power at the state legislature to negotiate with them to change the Enabling Act. So Oklahoma County, originally in the resolution, they said, we want 13 miles. Then they figured out they didn't have enough money, so they changed it to 7 miles. Well, OTA had already purchased all that right of way, so what'd they do with the extra right of way? They sold it to the developer friends. We don't know what the budget is right now. They haven't told you how much it's gonna cost. You can't negotiate things you don't know the full picture on. So I'd like you to think about that. And then after 3.5 years after the initial agreement was signed, they removed the dollar amount that would contribute to the cost of repairs, and they said all these things, and then finally the county said, we're not negotiating anymore. And I wanted to play you this clip from the March 2020 meeting. Hopefully you'll be able to hear it. You might not be able to hear it. It's them saying, we're done negotiating, they're not doing anything. So we're done. And you know what happened? OTA stuck them with a $2.2 million, $4 million bill for the county roads and nothing. So nothing that they did in their original resolution that the OTA said they were gonna do, they did anyway. So Jenks, the Creek Turnpike, and I'm trying to cram literally 2.5 years of knowledge about how they operate into 15 minutes. So if it seems like I'm going fast, I am. Because it's really important for you to know all of this, and I'm sorry we only have 15 minutes to talk about it. But in the Creek Turnpike up near Jenks, it's a very environmentally sensitive area. The OTA made them sign a resolution and said, we're gonna pay for all the environmental mitigation, we're gonna do light pollution, we're gonna do sound barriers, and then ended up doing nothing. And the city of Jenks had to come in and pay $1.8 million to do the work that the OTA was gonna do. Now, that doesn't sound like a lot of money, right? It was a teeny tiny segment on the turnpike. We're talking 59 miles of turnpike in Norman. So now what's gonna happen is the OTA is gonna transfer all this stuff that they said they were gonna do to the city of Norman. You're talking 1 million, you're not talking 2 million. You're talking 100, 200, $300 million to do what they said that they were supposed to do. So magnify this, because the Kickapoo was only, 18 miles long? Now we're talking, Jenks, the Creek Turnpike was only a couple miles long, now we're talking 59 miles. So it's a bigger ask. So anything you negotiate now, multiply it by 100. What's gonna happen in 15 years? Okay, so, just to finish with, Oklahoma County, in 2016, the Oklahoma County commissioner signed a simple resolution stating the OTA would purchase the right-of-way and gift it to Oklahoma County for frontage roads. 8 years later, all they have to show for that resolution is a $2.2 million bill for repairs on roads damaged by the OTA, and the OTA still hasn't transferred any of the right-of-way. So why did they sign a resolution? Yeah, I think you need to ask yourselves, why is the OTA wanting you to sign a resolution in 15 days? What is it that's so important about that? And I think they want the city to capitulate so the citizens give up the fight and the citizens stop going to the state legislature and the citizens stop talking with the federal government about those permits and everything. I think it's important for the city to stay strong. So the frontage roads, why do they want frontage roads? They want them for economic development. And that's why the city wants them too. You don't have to negotiate that, they will do it. Because why they want the turnpikes is not for traffic, it's not for safety, there's no justification, but it's for taking our 48th to 48th little development block and blowing it up all the way out to the turnpikes. They want those turnpikes to make the high density development a possibility, change the zoning. So we need to think about that as we negotiate as well. Okay, so some environmental claims. They think that they always say that they're gonna fix everything. Well, look what they did at the Kickapoo. That's not fantastic. In fact, some farmers are suing them because they can't use their equipment on any of their fields anymore because of the excessive flooding causing too much topography change. Serious flooding. Now, we look pretty similar to Oklahoma County in that we have a big time wetlands that go through on that east-west connector. I'm only showing you a part. Again, I have like 3 minutes and 30 seconds left in my part of the presentation to show you this, but you know what happens along Indian Hills, it floods. And you know what the OTA is gonna tell you? Oh, we're gonna make it better. We're gonna put a 30-foot high embankment. That is not going to make it better, and I'll show you a picture in a second so you can get an idea. Okay, so pretend this is the east-west connector. You're looking west. You've got 6 lanes across. The eastbound lanes are 50-50, so now you've got an embankment that's about 120 feet wide. Then you got another 160 feet to the service road. How do I know this? An insider gave me the design. Okay. Now you want to do environmental mitigation. You got another 300 feet to add south of that south road. So now you're taking 1,200 feet of eminent domain. What happens to the water when it comes down from the northwest? You got a big old pond. It runs along the embankment and it comes to your county roads and it floods through those. So this is, from a civil engineering standpoint, it's a disaster. Can we build it? Yes. Should we build it? No. This is on the Kilpatrick. You've got some environmental mitigation ponds shown here. It's not enough to capture some of the flooding, so you're gonna have to make it wider. Anticipated right of way right now looks like at the top, 700 feet. It may actually look more like what's down below. There's a whole bunch more homes, okay? But I can't tell you because I don't have a study. Civil engineers don't design roadways without backup studies. I don't understand how the OTA has gotten away with doing this for 77 years because all of their built turnpikes have serious problems along them. The Kilpatrick, the Kickapoo, the Creek, the H.E. Bailey, the Indian Nation, they all have environmental disasters around them, and no one's stopping them. I think the city of Norman can be the first city in history to make them do environmental studies. Make them do them. Okay, so if you do this environmental mitigation that we should do and we have to do, you're gonna take a whole bunch more homes. This is just Ward 8 because of time. So you're gonna add another 260, 300 feet south of Indian Hills. Eminent domain process. I said I have all the data, and Kelly Wilson actually pulled all this data from I can hear myself talk, sorry. That's
delays.
They pulled it from, we pulled it from the courts, and we know that 44 of 104 property owners took the OTA to court. Almost everyone received additional money. In yellow is the additional money that they were offered, so, you know, that's a big deal, 1.8 million more. That's like, you know, significant. But these people had money to start with. They had money to take them to court, and they waited 5+ years to get the money. So what I think the city of Norman should think about is requiring the OTA. You're never gonna make them do it, but state that you want them to use the Uniform Relocation Act until we can change the state law to make sure that our citizens get what they deserve. If you're gonna get eminent domain by the OTA, you have 90 days to 4 months to vacate. You get a letter, you either say yes or no. Then you probably say no because they're gonna lowball you. Then you go to a commissioner's hearing. And then if you don't want that, they deposit the money and then they have 30 days to vacate your premise. That's not how we want over 1,000 of our families to be handled along these turnpikes. And just to finish up, we also have an investigative audit and a loft evaluation going that I think are gonna show significant problems with the OTA, and I think the city of Norman should just put your heels in the sand and just wait until this is done, so you can see what you're dealing with. Because if you don't believe me, I think you're gonna really be shocked when you see the result from the auditor. And then I'll leave the conclusions up, but what I really want you to do is not do anything. I don't want you to negotiate, because it's in bad faith. They're not gonna do anything they say they're gonna do, and they're asking you for a partnership to weaken our position in the state legislature and to weaken our position to fight them in eminent domain takings. But I do want you to do all these other things that Rob's probably gonna talk about. You should insist that they should only use, for example, specific county-controlled roads during construction, and that damage to those roads will be assessed annually. Don't get caught like Oklahoma County did, wait until the very end and being owed $4 million and only getting 1.8 of that. If you have any questions, you can always contact me. I'd be happy to come back and talk to you. And I have a Substack that goes out every couple days that talks about all the things OTA. Rob?
Let's trade chairs. Okay. Let me make sure I'm good here. There we go. There we go. Well, you're going to get a version of a presentation that I've given several times, and it's got a lot of adaptive things to it, and it's got some updates to it since the presentations that Kelly Wilson and I did for a little Edu session Sunday. And those have all been provided to you, and I'd really welcome you if you want to see some expanded information to do that. I kind of like to start this with this, and I let you guys read this. And think about why you ran for council, why you're elected to council, why you're a department head of staff. That's Robert F. Kennedy Sr. in Cape Town, South Africa in 1966. And this is one of those, you take that and take it around in your pocket and keep it handy if you're ever going to be involved in any type of government. What's that a picture of? That's Lake Thunderbird standing on the east looking west. If the OTA had had their way, there'd be something else in a couple of years cutting right through the sun. And that would be the South Extension. That won't happen if we stay strong. The federal government has already said that can't happen once. And we have to stay strong and make sure we stand up to them and work with the federal government and work with our town to do that. Now, one of the things I was asked by several council members was to say, isn't this inevitable? Isn't it a certainty? Isn't it going to happen? Let's look at what our group, Oklahomans for Responsible Transportation, has been able to do without winning a Supreme Court case. As you saw in the picture, we got the federal government to say no. to turnpikes right up against the lake. And we think if we stay strong with that and you stay strong with that, they'll do that. We've gotten the legislature to change the way the OTA board is appointed. It's now a joint thing of the governor, the House, the Senate, not just the governor. We've gotten the legislature to start reforming eminent domain that Amy talked to you a little bit about. We've been introducing bills and advocating for a continuing package of reforms of the OTA. They're not extreme, they're not abolish the OTA, they're not scratch out turnpikes. They're a reform package that makes the OTA do a lot of things like, hey, what we're doing here before we take action, be accountable to the public and take in public input and consider alternatives. We've been blocked so far by usually maybe one unfriendly transportation committee chair. Our bills have had great success when they've gotten to the floor. We had a leading role in getting the Attorney General to order a full investigative audit of the OTA. An Attorney General, even though we've got a fantastic one in office right now, is not just going to do that because you asked. They're going to have to be presented, and we have presented them. We have an outstanding group of researchers, an outstanding retired CPA in public finance, Cheryl Pierce. We have showed the Attorney General reasons why an investigative audit needs to be done. Now, as usual, that's not, they can't talk about the investigative audit, but be careful who you get in bed with. There's some other investigative audit results that are coming out today that are telling you maybe we shouldn't get in bed with someone who's under an investigative independent audit unless we're careful and find some ways out if we need to. We led ending the practice of dual, triple office holders in state government. I think you guys were actually the latest, the first little example of that recently, but we did it at the state level, and we did it with the OTA and the Secretary of Transportation and ODOT. So those are just some of the things we have been able to do, even without a Supreme Court case in our favor. Here, of course, is the map that you all see. You can go to accessoklahoma.com and see that at any time. And we've got yellows and we've got blues. Blue is not blue because they just haven't gotten around to it yet. Blue is blue because they can't go here anymore. And that's going to affect, this is between 24th and 36. You can see this is as you near Hog Creek. They can't go here anymore. They're going to have to figure out where they can go, what they can do, if they can do. This is the east-west connector, of course. Next slide. We just got notice. Kelly kind of keeps track of these things for us. This is where the game starts, right here. This is the span of the Canadian River. This is a little bit of an old map. The arrow you saw before is a little more updated. And today we figured out in some form or fashion, some federal permitting processes have begun with the Corps of Engineers. The Canadian River is a project of the Corps of Engineers. It's our contention, and I think we're pretty solid on these grounds, that the OTA should have to get what we call a Section 404 permit and a Section 408 permit to span the bridge and effectively alter the Corps of Engineers project. And that's a place, I believe Mr. Sturts mentioned in what I would call the conference, where the federal government comes into play and NEPA would be more directly impacted, either through an environmental impact assessment or an full environmental impact statement. Obviously, our goal is to get to phase 2. Here, you can see, look, this is your map. This is the floodplain. This is old 10 Mile Flats floodplain. Here's Indian Hills. Here is the corridor. Here's that 60th access road. This floodplain goes all the way down to civilized high-density Norman. You guys have had lots of experience with that, so your floodplain ordinance should be coming into effect very soon. Now, there's the south extension, a picture of the south extension. Here are some key resolution revisions. Some of these are outlined in an email I sent to the council. Here are some keys. I'm going to go over some whys to the extent I have time. And I'm gonna blow through these pretty quickly. Any specific references to the old south extension route and exits should be stricken. Those are in there. We don't know where the south extension's going. We don't know where the exits are gonna be. I think you can walk away from that. Alternative route analysis expectations of the OTA need to include no build analysis. The south extension, any alternative build analysis should include not only a no build, but a build on the east side rather than the west side of Lake Thunderbird. That's something the legislature presses about, our local legislative contingent. Eminent domain, the city should insist that the OTA comply with make-whole concepts set forth in the Uniform Relocation Assistance Act. Strong enforceable written agreements must follow this up. You guys, to do some spoiler alerts and to get you on another subject that you're going to be going in September, if you're going to do this resolution, think of this resolution as a project plan. Get your TIF hat on for a minute. Think of this resolution more as a project plan. It's not got the teeth of a project plan. And then you've got to do development agreements after that have to be specific and ironclad and tie the OTA down. And I think what Kelly and Amy have told you is watch out and be forewarned. They did not live up to their word in Oklahoma City. Forget about the 10-foot multimodal path. Infrastructure provisions need to be more specific than robust. Protection from flooding houses is paramount. Rigorous environmental studies with no conflicts of interest. As on the subject of environmental studies, you all need to clarify and strengthen your floodplain ordinance. It's a maze. I think it's, in some ways, I look over it and it's more difficult to understand than the Internal Revenue Code. Some of these things you can take care of with strengthening your floodplain ordinance and your associated ordinance. There are many municipalities who have their own environmental study requirements. You can do that. The real reason to have a resolution is strong policy direction to staff. That's really what this is. So staff isn't throwing up their hands. There's nothing about a resolution that is legally binding. If it's truly a resolution and not an ordinance by name. The resolution really doesn't bind anyone to anything, but what it does do is you don't have staff wondering what it is you'd like them to do as a matter of policy. They have clear policy direction. This is too complicated to just keep in your head. Now, what is it council wanted us to do? No partnership and fluff assertions. The OTA wants to be able to wave around a resolution at the state capitol to the federal government where the permitting process has begun now and say, Norman wants this, therefore this, there are partners in this. Well, that's not where your citizens stand on this, but you can work with them on this with diplomacy and statecraft. The ordinance needs to state that it does not revoke and should not be construed as revoking the 22 resolution. And reaffirm your basic policy opposition to the turnpikes. Let's forget about that. You guys can look at this slide and figure out my experience. These are the federal flowage easements. In years in the future, you're going to be dealing, and the floodplains kind of coincide with these. These are places where there are private property owners above the black stuff, which is federal land, above the blackout lines, where the federal government has in the chain of title an easement to these lands. The OTA would have to have permission to put a turnpike over there. If you were ever to go over one of these flowage easements, you would see no development on them whatsoever. You have to have federal permission to get development there. That's a place where your floodplain ordinance dovetails with federal permissions. Here's something specific. Here is a way to use a little statecraft and maintain your citizens' desire for opposition to the turnpikes, but be diplomatic and understand what happened. There's this concept, the first concept has gone out of the last draft resolution. The second concept is kind of in the draft of the resolution, but it's not very precise on what the Supreme Court decided. It needs to be more precise on what the Supreme Court decided. There's the do not revoke language. And I was asked a little bit to talk about the legalities of this, whether, this was a 6-3 decision against us. But what I kind of like to say is we got Chevron. On August 1st, 2023, a majority of the Oklahoma Supreme Court issued a decision that said, we're just going to defer to the OTA as the agency in charge of turnpikes. On June 28th, 2024, at the federal level, the United States Supreme Court got rid of that legal doctrine. And if you look in the dissenting opinions, they say, I'm at 235. Gotcha. The dissenting opinions acknowledge that, but the linchpin of the majority's decision in the Turnpikes cases is now gone at the federal level. And that means we're coming back at some point. We're coming. We've got to get a case or controversy. We don't have it now, but we will have it sooner or later. There will be a different governor soon. There will be a different composition of the Supreme Court soon. There will be different legislators soon. This is not a done deal. Plessy versus Ferguson, Dred Scott were not done deals. Someone had to come up and get Brown versus Board of Education, and that often happens very, very, very fast. And here, this last little thing, I remember Councilmember Holman speaking to this at study session 1.0. This is what the United States Supreme Court said about courts deferring to agencies. It leaves those attempting to plan around agency action in an eternal fog of uncertainty. And look where we are in Norman. That is our zone of uncertainty because the Oklahoma Supreme Court deferred to the Oklahoma Turnpike Authority and said, well, you can put this route anywhere you want. They could put the South Extension right through here if they wanted to. There's nothing that says they can't do that, except you would be in a position where you would have to fight them not to do that. Now, they're not going to do that, but that whole zone between 24th and 36th, all the way out to the lake, is potentially in the crosshairs of the Turnpike. And we've got thousands and thousands and thousands of people that don't know that. No build, alternative build analysis, I'll leave you with a couple of things. Representative Sherry Conley said, a new bridge from Newcastle to Norman does not mean we need to impose new turnpikes all over Norman. You know, we can have the OTA do an alternative build, no build analysis. We're going to advocate for that with the federal government. And we've got to be able to discern the difference between a good policy goal and what we do to execute that policy goal. And the OTA is giving us a poor way of executing the policy goal. A new bridge from Newcastle to Norman does not mean that. And just kind of to conclude up, look, we're not set up for unprecedented turnpikes tracing all up and down and across Norman. We made a promise to our perimeters not to reduce their world to concrete. And you can see there, this is really about the rule of law, representative democracy, individual liberty, and protecting our way of life. We are a bit of a different place in Norman. They don't know that at the OTA. They don't know that at different places. They don't necessarily know that in Tulsa. But we are set up not to have what they are trying to do to us. Turnpikes with mass suburban sprawl economic development on our perimeters. So consider that. You have access to Amy's slides, my slides that give you more specifics, more specific times, the hour little edu-session slides we did beforehand. And I'm going to yield it. I think staff's going to come up and have some things to say and some presentations to do. Thank you for your time. Okay.
Mr. Knight and Shannon. Did you come?
I hate how this feels like now it's the other side.
We don't have any prepared presentations. We were told we were here tonight to hear the other side, but we're happy to answer any questions the council may have.
Well, I've got a statement I'd like to read. In doing this, we've had a lot of discussion, and I want to follow this kind of counsel, but we need you guys' guidance in things, what we can do, what we cannot do, how everyone else figures out. And so, one of the things that where'd Shannon go? Oh, okay. Amy, can you change seats with Shannon, please, so I can see her?
Sure.
I have a lot of trouble hearing sometimes when we're talking over people. And I guess to answer a lot of questions, and of course, council, I'm sure has other questions than with me. But I think what goes the most to my thought is that nobody likes the idea of the OTA using eminent domain to displace families and bulldoze homes. Nobody likes being bullied by a state organization that comes to our city and simply dumps a surprise turnpike project in our lap and dictates to us that that's gonna happen, like it or not. And I suggest that we add a preamble to the proposed resolution. That preamble would be, the city of Norman does not welcome or endorse the intrusion of the turnpikes built by the Oklahoma Turnpike Authority into our community. We enter into this resolution because we are duty bound to comply with existing state law and Oklahoma Supreme Court rulings. Access Oklahoma Plan is the law of the state of Oklahoma. The Supreme Court has spoken. They say that OTA is legally allowed to proceed, and they have done so. And we, as council members, swore an oath of office, and in that it says, I, you gave your name, do solemnly swear to affirm that I will support, obey, and defend the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the state of Oklahoma. And that oath, there's more that goes on about taking bribes, and that's not a problem. That oath obligates us to follow laws of the state of Oklahoma. Access Oklahoma is the law, whether we like it or not. The council does not get to pick and choose which laws we will enforce, ignore, or nullify, nor are we able to pick and choose which parts of the laws that we will follow. We're not a kingdom unto ourselves. We are a municipal corporation subject to the laws of the state of Oklahoma. By choosing to disobey the law, we hold ourselves above the law, and individuals on this council may expose themselves to, and the city, to legal consequences that can have profound personal and professional implications. Big thing is the public going to be able to trust us? And just as the supremacy clause in the U.S. Constitution establishes that the U.S. Constitution, federal laws made pursuant to it, and the treaties under its authority constitute the supreme law of the land, and thus taking priority over any conflicting state laws. And so it is with our relationship with the state of Oklahoma. The laws of the state take priority over our ordinances, resolutions, and so forth. We're not in a position to dictate to any state agency. The council passed a resolution in March of 22 trying to stop the OTA from building turnpikes in Norman. The Supreme Court of Oklahoma ruled that this resolution had no effect on the ability of the OTA to move forward. And so we pleaded with the OTA to reroute, abandon their plans, all to no avail. I've spoken with our senator on the Transportation Committee and several House representatives in the State House asking them to change the Access Oklahoma plan without a result. The legislative bodies passed the plan and Governor Stitt signed it into law. If a group wants to change state law, they need to bring their concerns to the legislature. The legislature can change state law. Municipalities cannot. Legislators can change the requirements for turnpike construction, environmental studies, relocation services, etc., and we cannot. The council members, as council members, we are charged by the state to uphold the law in its current state and to apply it fairly and justly in our decisions for the residents of Norman. To the topic of ruining Lake Thunderbird as our water supply, what proof do we have that this will pollute Lake Thunderbird? What proof do we have that it'll ruin local shallow water-bearing sands, perched aquifers that supply our home wells? And what proof do we have that it'll ruin the Garber Wellington? I spent hours researching pollution from large roadways. I found that the state of Oklahoma, there are more than 6,800 bridge structures that span major rivers and lakes, named and unnamed perennial streams and creeks, and other roads, highways, and railroads. On the average, passenger vehicles and buses have traveled more than 73.7 million miles each day in 2019 on the state-owned highway system. I tried to find any reputable reports that these highways and bridges in Oklahoma contributed to any acts in violation of the Federal Clean Water Act, Clean Air Act, or any other federal environmental legislation. I found none, except for point source kinds of sources. There are 200 lakes in Oklahoma. I searched for instances where lakes were polluted by highways from other vehicles on those highways that polluted any body of water or waterway. I found no reputable reports on that these highways and bridges contributed to pollution, except for instances of littering from the vehicles on the roadway. Some highway bridges have been in existence over lakes since the late 1940s. And if so, if these roadways ruin our lakes, why is there no proof that they do so? The fact is the state of Oklahoma is mandated to comply with the laws and regulations of the Federal Environmental Protection Agency and the Oklahoma Department of Environmental Quality, Oklahoma Water Resources Board, the Bureau of Reclamation, and the Central Oklahoma Master Conservancy District. This council does not have the authority to mandate expensive, time-consuming environmental testing simply by the insistence of a group that hasn't proven these tests are needed. Who is going to pay for these NEPA, EIS, and the other tests that are not required by law? OTA said it would not. The city does not propose to pay for them out of our budget. They are extremely expensive and are not required for road building or any other governmental entity in this state. Requiring them as additional tests would probably be found arbitrary and capricious by a court. The mere innuendo that roads and bridges will ruin our water supply simply by their existence does not hold water. The council must hold the legal parameters set forth by our regulatory environmental agencies. We must not be swayed by hypothetical rhetoric. The city of Norman has competent and experienced staff with the technical expertise and advanced education to accurately monitor the soil and water in the vicinity of the turnpike and monitor it while it is in construction and post-construction. COMCD has been monitoring the water quality in the lake since 1965, and we have a tremendous amount of recorded data on the water quality in the lake. We will know about any changes to the water long before anything can affect our water supply. As the impairment of Lake Thunderbird, the word impairment is being misused in the common narrative. The impairment of the lake is caused by fertilizer, which is phosphorus and nitrogen levels and chlorophyll A levels that are detectable and contribute to algae growth, which causes taste and odor issues for our drinking water and a lower dissolved oxygen in the water. There's also impairment from silt washing down into the lake. We are now finding that there's some contamination from mercury found in the lake's fish, as it was in 71 other lakes in Oklahoma. The Oklahoma Department of Wildlife tells us that with fish from Lake Thunderbird, we should not eat over 2 meals per month of largemouth bass over 19 inches long, sockeye over 22 inches long, but crappie, channel catfish, spotted bass, white bass are all safe to eat. Mercury is apparently coming as an airborne contaminant from industry, coal-fired boilers, and cremation ash. None of these are at contaminant levels that cause the water to be dangerous to drink or be toxic. We treat the water that is supplied to our drinking water, and we remove these contaminants to within drinking water standards. As to the silt deposited in the lake, we know that the lake contained 119,600 acre-feet of water when it was finished in 1965. We estimate that we lose 315 acre-feet of capacity to sedimentation each year. We now estimate that after 59 years of existence, Lake Thunderbird holds 101,600 acre-feet of water, which is approximately 85% of its original capacity. The acre-foot equals 325,828.8 gallons. The lake may be losing capacity slowly, but it is not dying or toxic. When it was built, it was expected to last approximately 100 years. The city is doing all that it can to reduce or eliminate soil washing into and being deposited in Lake Thunderbird. Part of this sedimentation reduction will be the proposed wetlands project along the Little River. This project will slow the flow of the stormwater to allow it to settle and be made cleaner through the string of wetlands that the OTA agreed to build. That, along with other smaller projects of stormwater management, will help us reduce sedimentation, reduce and remove phosphorus and nitrogen, lower the chlorophyll A levels, and increase dissolved oxygen so that we can improve the lake's water quality. I urge this council to obey the laws of this state and the federal government and let us deal with the facts, not opinions or unfounded claims of impending doom. We agree that some of the changes in the city's, we should agree to some of the changes in the city's resolution that agree with existing law and accept the amended resolution. This would allow those who oppose the OTA to bring their fight to the state legislature where it belongs. Council? Yes, sir.
That was a lot. I'm just curious there's a lot of insistence not to disobey the laws of the state by passing this resolution. In fact, again, I urge council to obey the laws of the state. How would writing a resolution that emphasizes the protection of our water disobey state law?
I would agree with you that it's anything that we can do to protect the water is a good thing. And we have to look at that. We have to look at the modal path, whatever that thing's called. We have to look at all the ways that we're putting that in and preserve as many houses. Writing a resolution doesn't do anything to the law. All it does is if we're to do something, we're doing something, and we require them to spend a whole bunch of money. We're not obeying what the law says for us to do because there are different kinds of money.
So that's where you're suggesting that we're going to be disobeying the law?
No, sir. I'm in saying that we, first off, aren't going to, that we're going to somehow not, we're going to add on extra things to the existing law. The state law doesn't make them do NEPA. State doesn't make them do other kinds of environmental or studies or whatever. Do I think they're a good idea? Yeah. But can we make somebody do that? And that's what I think the disobedience is.
Do you know why they don't require that?
Probably cost, I don't know.
Because every other agency does have to do that. But it's a matter of the OTA not accepting any federal funds or state funds, that they're not held to the same standards that the rest of the state is held to.
Like
It's kind of a workaround.
ODOT, yeah. I understand.
And I don't think that there's any reason that we should be ashamed or afraid of just ensuring once and for all that our water is going to be protected, and knowing for a fact that if this is going to be constructed, that it's going to be constructed in the most responsible manner and in the most responsible place, and presenting those findings and that information to the public. There's no reason we should fear transgressing the law.
Just to add to that, I don't really see requesting that they make whole people. Yes, they don't have to follow it because state legislature determines how that gets worked out. But this is a resolution more for our staff to request that they do these extra steps. And even if they don't, let's say like on the NEPA side of things, because that is a federal thing, we could ask or request that staff ask the OTA to do that, but also request the EPA to work with the OTA and us to ensure that we're getting the best protections for our watershed. There is something I was concerned about with, I believe it was Kilpatrick and that detention pond. I think there was a church over there that is, I believe, suing in retrospect because that wasn't enough detention. So, yes, it's not required, but I don't think it's disobeying to request. And we can't really demand anything in this. So there are other things we can do, though. I don't think it hurts to ask.
A request doesn't bother me in the least. It's the demand. I think that I think is.
I think it's a misrepresentation because there's factually you can't demand or insist or say shall.
Yeah.
It's more factual to say we request this.
No.
And I would say too, I would like to see I didn't dislike that preamble, but we are in a housing crisis. And I think when we talk about requesting, making people whole, where that's like 2.5 times the worth of the fair market value as in Councilmember Hinkle's amendments, I think we should put that out there. If our nation is struggling with affordable housing and housing, the state is as well. As I understand it, affordable housing and housing is at the top of everybody's list. I know from even dealing with OML that they were really curious what zoning things we should pursue as cities to help with the housing crisis. So I think this resolution language can acknowledge that and say this is why we're requesting this.
So, Councilmember Grant, our only caution to council is if during your push for right-of-way with other agencies, City of Norman, we acquire a lot of right-of-way for our projects too. And if you add 2.5 times to the right-of-way costs, you're gonna really slow down your capital project capabilities just because the budget won't go so far. That doesn't result in more money available to pay 2.5 times
And that's
the
just
appraised
for
value.
property owners. I'm also concerned about renters, and what making them whole is that a down payment? What are down payments these days? I hear examples of property owners that require you earn 3 times what the rent is, which would technically be affordable, 30% of your income, right? But what if this is somebody who's retired? What if this is somebody on disability? What's affordable, what they were in may not be affordable what they're forced to relocate to. And I do think moving, closing costs, those things that go into adding up beyond the fair market value. I don't know if that's 2.5 times. Maybe Councilmember Hinkle can speak to why he chose that particular number. But there's high value in making sure that people don't fall through the cracks.
I think, Councilmember Dixon.
I've got about 15 questions for Dr. Serrato and Rob Norman, if that's what we're doing. If we're not doing that, then
I was trying to keep it in here. Do you have, was there something that you missed in the,
no. I guess I'll just keep it to, I'm okay with a Santa Claus list of we want this, we want that, we want this, really like a this. Personally don't have a lot of problems with any of the asks. And I might be, a quick statement, I might be the only person at this table who's had family members. My in-laws had their, some farmland taken from the OTA. So I don't want nothing I ask, no questions I ask, nothing I say should ever be construed if I'm a huge fan of the OTA. But again, like Dr. Serrato said, I mean, they're gonna do what they're gonna do. So I'm fine with the Dear Santa, we would like this list.
okay. Yes, sir. Remember who was.
No, it's all right. Yeah, lots of thoughts. Okay, I think I'll start with the preamble you read. I think was really strong, and it encapsulates a lot of my thoughts and the fact that we don't want this, but if we're going to get it, then this. And so, I mean, that's really the way I framed all of this. Don't want it, but if we have to have it, then we need to have some things to offset the trauma, for lack of a better word, on the community. I think, I really appreciate the asking 2.5 times over fair market value for property. I think that's reasonable. I understand where Mr. Pyle is coming from on this. I think from the city's perspective, when we try to acquire right away and we use eminent domain, we're usually talking about 5 feet strips of the front of somebody's property, not taking houses. And so I think as long as we can spell out that this is for the OTA, I think I'm good with that. But even if it transfers over to city stuff, I think we'll be somewhat protected. I agree with Councilmember Grant, but the affordable housing concept, we're already 20,000 units short in this community, and we're allowing another 600 houses to be taken out of our stock. That hurts. We're trying to go the opposite direction, not lose houses. So What else? There was a lot of things here. I don't know. Come back to me. I'm sure I've got
Yeah.
more here.
Well, oh, yes, sir.
Okay, so just a few things. So, I mean, they're asking us to do something that we don't really want to do and that they can't make us do. We don't have to pass any resolution, do we? We're not required by law to pass anything. And I have a lot of concern that even if we do pass something, as has been noted, are they going to follow through with whatever we ask them to do anyway? There's a lot of uncertainty, as we've seen, that there is no final route yet. There's been no approval for even their first phase of this, which would tell me they're years from it. So why are we having to pass a resolution on anything when they don't even have a route yet that's been approved, including their very first phase, let alone the north-south route? The variance of space in between 24th Avenue and the lake that is in limbo right now, not knowing if they're going to be in a route or not. We have no idea about that. I mean, really, I'm just having a harder and harder time determining what am I even voting on a resolution for at this point, when there is so much uncertainty. Yes, the Supreme Court has made a ruling about deferring to an state agency, but from my perception and the information we've been given, the OTA is nowhere near actually doing anything. And I do have a lot of concern. I mean, the runoff pollution issues, so the lake, urban areas of Norman and Moore and South Oklahoma City are what we know is where the pollution is coming from that's running off into the lake and causing those issues. And I agree with you, Mayor, there's a lot of misconceptions about what pollution or issues we have regarding well water and heavy metal issues, and then lake water in regard to stormwater runoff and algae blooms and things like that. But we know urbanization is the main factor of that, and the urbanization of Norman and Moore and OKC over the last few decades, building this highway in that area just by the mere fact of removing thousands of trees and placing, hundreds of yards of concrete over it, and that its intent is to reroute specifically semi-truck traffic off of I-35. And what do semi-trucks carry a lot of times? Hazardous chemicals. And so there are a lot of instances around the country of accidents or collisions where semi-trucks carrying hazardous chemicals have leaked into rivers and caused massive destruction, environmental issues that have gone on for many years afterwards. And that's just always been my concern about this. There's not that road there now, so there's not that risk of that happening currently. But if it's there, there will be, always will be. And it only will take one time for it to cause a major situation on our lake. And so I appreciate all the information that was given to us today, and we've heard a lot of it before, and it just continues to evolve over the last almost 3 years that we've been dealing with this. So I agree too that why are we having to ask them to do frontage roads? They are going to do frontage roads because they want people to be able to get on and off. They want economic development along their turnpikes so that more people will use the turnpike, just like we see in the north side of Oklahoma City. They're going to have access points where they think it will benefit them the most. So why do we need to ask them for that? And wetlands seems like they would have to be required anyway. So what additionally are we asking them for? And then as much as I like the idea of a multimodal path, and I think it would be very nice to have that to help connect our loop, I don't want to ask for anything that would result in more property being taken than what they were already planning to take. So, that's kind of how I feel about that. Is I want to be real careful about what we're asking them for, because is there going to be, more damage done to people because of what we're asking for, and I don't want to do that while also balancing, are we asking for stuff that we think is trying to improve the situation, like more wetlands or things like that? So I don't think there's anything wrong with asking them to, us asking for a higher standard. Now, whether they want to comply with it or whether they have to or not, you may be correct. But if we don't really want this and it's being forced, then I feel like asking them for more.
So a couple of points. It is staff's understanding that the timeline for the east-west route, including the bridge over the Canadian at Newcastle, OTA anticipates traffic on that route in 2027. So that part we believe is very short out in front of us. The north-south, yeah, there's an awful lot of work left to do, and it's supposedly the very last component in the 15-year Access Oklahoma plan. So maybe what that means is traffic would be anticipated 15 years after the Supreme Court ruling. So we don't believe that is an immediate scenario, and I'm sure they're probably out assessing a right of way and, looking for the shortest distance between 2 points in terms of its cost. So if there is a time crunch, it's definitely on the east-west. It is staff's understanding that where there are frontage roads, there will be 5-foot sidewalks. And if it is our request to have 10-foot multimodal pathways instead of 5-foot sidewalks, we don't anticipate that requiring any additional right-of-way to provide you with multimodal paths that fit our current multimodal path design criteria at 10 feet wide.
That's something I'd want to know for sure. If we were going to include anything like that in a resolution, I'd want to know for sure does that make any difference in the amount of property they're already taking or not, as some folks seem to think is the case. And then it just seems like if they're just now starting a permitting process and they're going to be building the longest bridge in the state of Oklahoma and it's going to span over across the entire river and floodplain, that's a massive project.
Biggest bridge in Oklahoma.
Seems like it would take more than 2 years probably to build to, once they did get approval, which, so I know the 60% thing, but I don't know what we could ask them for that they're going to do, and if the history is true that other resolutions haven't been followed through with, that other cities and counties have passed, then, what is the point of us doing that? And especially if it does hinder our residents in their ability to continue going to the Capitol. Because I do have concern that are they gonna, if whatever we pass here, are they going to wave that around at the legislature and say, well, no, the city council, they're asking us for stuff, so they want us to do this. I think the first part of the preamble I do agree with a lot, especially just making it clear that we don't want this, we're not asking you to do this stuff because we're in agreement. We're trying to potentially make the best of a bad situation, I think, and we have an issue that can we get some things in it that could help address the issue we already have with the lake and all that stuff. So that's kind of where I'm at on it. I'm not feeling a real urgency to even pass anything at this point because I don't have any guarantee or any evidence of any guarantee that whatever we asked for them would actually be done. So, but thank you for putting that together.
Yes.
I'm kind of on the same page as Councilman Holman. Got a question for Rick. Rick, if we pass this resolution, is the city legally bound to everything that we put in there for perpetuity? I mean,
well, and I sent you guys
because to go along with what he said, are they going to be able to use this against who I think has the most standing, which is High Cobb?
Can't speak to how the OTA or what they would or wouldn't do, but the memo that I sent you earlier today talked about the fact that a resolution is the opinion of council. It's what this council's opinion was or is at this particular point in time. So it's not an agreement, it's not a contract, it doesn't bind anybody to anything. I have tremendous difficulty with the concept of us saying OTA, trying to express what we think their intent is. It's really this body's intent.
Right.
So, again, it's an expression of this body's opinion.
Do you feel that we're limiting ourselves if we pass a resolution and we don't include something in it?
Well, the difficulty that I think we're struggling with from staff's perspective is, I think this resolution, the purpose of it is to get your foot in the door, so to speak. So that when OTA goes and sits down and says, okay, we're designing how this is gonna work, does the city have someone at the table to say, we want these things, or we think this is appropriate or not appropriate? Because OTA doesn't have to let us into that process.
And this resolution allows.
Correct. What they are telling us is, this resolution, however you word it, allows you to be part of their internal process with regard to design. Now, we've talked a little bit about the concept of partnering and things along those lines, and that was brought up at the last time we met. And as a result of the comments specifically from Councilmember Holman, we took all the partnering language out, all of the fluffy, flowery language about partnerships and so on and so forth. We removed all of that from the proposed resolution because there was a consensus from council of, this really isn't a partnership. It really is something for the city to have some say with regard to how this turnpike is ultimately constructed. I mean, that's all it is. I mean, it's what this body sort of wants to ask the OTA to do. And again, they have the discretion to do it or not do it. I mean, like I said before, since it really isn't an agreement, you couldn't plop that resolution down in court and say, well, they said they were gonna do X, Y, or Z. It really is something that just starts the conversation process going forward. And again, it expresses what this council's will is or opinion is with regard to that specific project.
Regardless of what we put in here, OTA has the option of doing it or not doing it.
That's correct.
That's all their prerogative.
That's correct.
Councilmember Ball, to that point, in our last conversation with the OTA, when we brought up the concept of linear wetlands along the Little River and that Indian Hills alignment, that was a conversation that came from the AIM steering committee out of the update to the comprehensive land use plan. And that was the creative minds of community members trying to figure out, one, how to improve water quality, and two, make sure we have enough capacity to handle those 20 some odd thousand new rooftops that are going to be required between now and the year 2040. And in that conversation regarding linear wetlands, the OTA's comment was, do you have people that know how to design wetlands? And we know some, and they said, yeah, we'd prefer to plug your design expert in with our civil people who draw freeways and bridges that don't draw a lot of wetlands to make sure that, meets the need. So that's all the information we have as it relates to how you might have the ability to influence what ultimately gets built. And you might have some influence as to who goes to the table on the design side of wetlands, as an example.
I like what Councilman Dixon said. It's pretty much like a wish list for Santa Claus. But we don't even get to sit on Santa Claus's lap unless we give it to him first, in this case. So, I'm kind of with everybody else. I mean, this resolution just kind of seems like a moot point, except for we do want to actually be able to continue the conversation. As far as, I like Councilman Hinkle's, I don't think anybody should be penalized for pursuing a due process to fight for their homes. So, I mean, I think they should get everything they want, or that's required by law. And I think we're all on the same page when it comes to the watershed and our water quality, protecting our environment. So, I mean, I think if we're all here in good faith, I know not everybody here thinks the resolution is the best idea. I don't even know. But
one point to follow up on what
Yes.
you just talked about, and the way that I've been thinking about this is and I've looked at a couple of cases, there aren't that many cases in Oklahoma that really talk about water quality issues. One of them is a federal case about the land application of poultry litter. And essentially, there's land application of poultry litter, it was causing phosphorus runoff into a water source for Tulsa. The remedy was the creation of an entity that determined a phosphorus index, and then there was a set amount of poultry litter that could be applied, land applied, so that it did not sort of exceed that phosphorus index into this water supply. So the way that I've been looking at that and thinking about it is, that is an example of that provision being applied on the back end of a set of circumstances. What I think the purpose of this resolution is to give you the opportunity to address those issues on the front end. So that, again, if we think that this type of wetland needs to be constructed in this particular area, you can talk about that issue on the front end as opposed to waiting for something to happen and then talk about remediation on the back end.
All right. Preemptive.
And we are talking about more than just wetlands.
Right.
I mean, I know that that's the buzzword that we all like to use, but the screen infrastructure, there's so many other options that if we can get them to employ, can make it a positive, improvement in the water quality. Instead of putting in a concrete flume, can we get them to use something like Fleximat, which we're using now, which is gonna slow water, it's gonna get infiltration, it's gonna allow grass to grow. Can we just find little things along the way that make a difference? And that's what I'm a proponent of, as well as some of the wetland mitigation. They're gonna have to do wetland mitigation if they disturb a wetland. And that's usually between 2 to 4 times what you disturb. So there's gonna be some of that that's gonna happen anyways. But I'm saying, what can we do above that that's gonna help us? It's gonna help remove contaminants. It's gonna help slow the water down. It's gonna stop the erosion. It's gonna stop the sedimentation into our lake. I think there's a lot of things that we can do and try to get them to incorporate. And there's been some loose conversations that they're willing to come out here and look at some of these things, these practices that Norman, we're kind of the leaders in this area, in our area, could show them and say, this works and here's where it works and why it works. So maybe we get those items incorporated into this if the design goes forward.
I agree. If we're gonna do a resolution, then we should request absolutely, that's what they told us in officer school. All they can do is deny you, request everything, and all they can do is turn you down. So if there's anything reasonable that we want in this resolution, I say we open up any and all of it and put it all in if we wanna pass it. Cause I don't have a lot of faith that it's gonna get passed if we don't put all this in. So if we're all here in good faith to get a resolution passed, which like I said, I know not everybody here wants that, but just to move forward, then that's what we should do. That's what I got.
It kind of came as a surprise to me that not everybody understood what a resolution formally was. And it's just a statement of the will, the collective will of the council. It's not illegally binding. We can't force the OTA to do anything. But it's a statement that says that this is what we believe. This is the standards and values that we're holding. This is on behalf of our citizens and our residents, not on behalf of the OTA, which is what struck me as kind of surprising and almost insulting from the beginning, that the OTA would come out and tell us, pass this resolution here, here's the content of what your collective will as the council is going to believe. And that's absurd, that we absolutely shouldn't be budging and coming out and saying that these are our principles, these are our values, they're supplied to us by the Oklahoma Turnpike Authority. We're gonna put together a resolution that's going to, at best, this is gonna set the standards of not only what we expect, but what we believe would best preserve our community and serve the residents so that we can represent our residents and their ongoing protection in the future of Norman. This is what we need to do that. We acknowledge that it's not going to, maybe none of it will be honored. And honestly, if the OTA does start honoring our wishes, then we need to be a little nervous, because they seem to grant wishes kind of like the monkey's paw, and we will regret the things that they come back and give us. So if we do start negotiating with them, making asks and demands, they might come and give us a sidewalk, but they'll take 1,000 homes to do it. And so, it's a wish list, but this is also a resolution that's not going to just disappear at the end of the day. It's not going to disappear at the end of the year. This is a resolution that's going to say, forever. Brenda will have it in her computer somewhere, and so anybody can call her up and ask for that one resolution that was passed. What did council think about this turnpike project, and what did they think should have happened? We don't need to be insulting the Turnpike Authority in it, and we don't need to be, as much as I would love to, because if it is gonna be forever, go ahead and put it on the Turnpike Authority's tombstone, how awful they are. But we don't need to be insulting them, but we do need to be setting our limits and setting the boundaries of what we expect for our town and our residents. We shouldn't be using any of the language that they're cramming down our throats. At the very least, that'd be dishonest. But yeah, I think if we're going to do this thing, if we're gonna make a resolution, we should do it on behalf of the city and not the Turnpike Authority. And if we're going to do it on behalf of the city, let's put what we genuinely believe needs to be there on behalf of the city.
I share those thoughts exactly. I don't think I could have said it better myself. I appreciate you acknowledging that, I think the time has come, or the time has passed to stop kicking them in the teeth and really just figure out how we get the best deal we can for the city. I think you're spot on there. In terms of the resolution having teeth or whatever, forgive my ignorance, I think for Mr. Knighton, I'm gonna ask, it's my understanding that you can turn a resolution into an ordinance. Is that correct? Like you can, if we pass a resolution, then at a certain date, at a future date, you could adopt it as an ordinance.
I think you would have to change the format.
Okay.
I mean, if you look at some of the cases I cited in that memo, it talks about the difference in how ordinances are written versus how resolutions are written.
Okay.
With the courts focusing a lot on the whereas clauses. So, and courts looking at those whereas clauses and saying, clearly you meant a resolution by how you formatted this particular document.
Okay.
So you would have to change, I think you'd have to change the format. I mean, obviously, to the extent that the city has the authority to enact an ordinance on a particular subject, I mean, the substance would be somewhat the same.
Right.
You would just change the format, and obviously the approval process would be different.
Sure. Do you think that gives us any more teeth, for lack of a better word, going that route?
Here's the difficulty for us in this context. And I was thinking about this from the perspective of, we are a charter city, so we're home rule. And some of our ordinances can conflict with state statutes to the extent that the courts have ruled that a particular state statute is not a matter of statewide concern. I mean, our ordinances that are a matter of local concern could conflict. Didn't really find any cases, didn't really look that hard, but I would assume that if this issue got presented to the court's gonna say that the OTA provisions in Title 69 are matters of statewide concern, and therefore we couldn't have a conflicting ordinance with regard to whatever the provisions in that particular title are as they relate to turnpikes. So it would depend on the subject matter.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, that makes sense. I just thought maybe that might be another route to give some more muscle behind this resolution, because I agree. I mean, I don't want to say it's pointless, because obviously we wouldn't be here talking about it if it was pointless, but I just want to make sure that things we put in a resolution, if we were to pass one, we get them. And so however we have to hold OTA's feet to the fire to get them, I'm willing to explore every option.
Well, I think part of it has to do with, talking about the fact that the resolution really isn't a contract. I do think if the OTA was willing to do some of the things you talked about with regard to the resolution, that might be the next step in the process, might be getting together with them and executing a formal contract. Obviously, it would come back to you guys for approval so that you would have input into what that particular contract language would say, but that would be the next step in the process to the extent that there were some things that needed to be memorialized by contract. And one of the things that we've been talking a little bit about has to do with the access road issue. And to me, the access road issue is more one of maintenance. Because if it's going to be our obligation to maintain it, if OTA obtains a right of way, constructs the frontage roads, at some point in time, they're gonna have to dedicate those to the city for maintenance and, for maintenance. So that's part of the issue, I think, why this resolution is important, because I can see a set of circumstances where what if a council came in and said, yeah, we want you to do these frontage roads, and OTA went out, got the right of way, built the frontage roads, and then council said, no, we're not gonna accept this. Because there's a piece of property over here just west of City Hall that's a vacant lot that the owner has to maintain. He doesn't like maintaining it, so every once in a while he'll deed it to the city. Well, you can't do that. In order for the city to be able to, for you to be able to impose the duty to maintain a piece of property on a municipality, the municipality has to formally accept it. That's why we do plats. So once you approve a final plat, all of those dedications you're accepting, so the roads, the streets, the sewer, the water lines, you're accepting those for maintenance purposes with regard to the city. So I suspect one of the issues about the frontage roads has to do with, if they construct them, if they obtain the right of way and construct them, ultimately they're gonna be looking to dedicate those to the municipality for maintenance purposes.
Do we have to accept?
That was gonna be my question as well.
You wouldn't have to accept them, and I think that goes to the issue, that to me is what drives a little bit of the issue of whether they would construct them or not. If the OTA is of the belief that you're not gonna accept them for maintenance purposes, I doubt that they're probably gonna construct them because they don't wanna maintain them. They don't want that. I'm trying to think, we've been talking about this, I'm trying to think of the turnpikes I've been on and the frontage roads associated with them, and I don't think OTA maintains those. I think those are maintained by either the municipality, or if they're in the county, they're maintained by the county. Our difficulty has to do with if on the east-west sort of proposal, right now, the frontage road is Rock Creek Road. Well, we own it, we own that. I mean, that's our responsibility for operation and maintenance. And regardless of whether they construct a frontage road on the north side, we're gonna remain being responsible for operating and maintaining Rock Creek Road.
Well, I think if we are gonna pass a resolution, language needs to be in there, even if it's the last line that says, all of this is dependent on a contractual agreement to follow, outlining some of the, again, make sure we've got real teeth in this thing, because I just really worry, we're gonna ask for the moon, and it's gonna be all legitimate things that we need to offset this coming to our town, and if there's no chance of getting them, then I have a hard time with that.
Would you take this place?
Yes. Who's next? Alden. Councilman Alden.
Yeah, so, okay. Part of the details of that, for example, the frontage road things, like on the Kilpatrick in North OKC by Quail Springs, the frontage road is Memorial Road. It's 2 lanes on each side of the turnpike. The turnpike is 3 lanes. And then every intersection is a multi-lane with signalized intersection on both sides. So would OTA be putting in the traffic signals at each intersection of the frontage road and 36th and 48th and 24th and so on and on? Or would we have to do it and pay for that at some point? And if they do put in the traffic lights, we'll have to maintain them, I assume, at that point. And so currently, our frontage roads on I-35, we maintain those 2-lane the way it is now.
Yes, we do.
And so we have a pretty good idea, I guess, about what it costs us to maintain those. We've done a lot of work on them in recent years and repaving them, and the UNP section is 3 lanes, and I guess we'll see what happens with 1-way and 2-way and all that. But we have an idea per mile what it costs us to maintain the frontage roads on I-35.
A rough idea. I can't give you that number off the top of my head, but
Right,
honestly,
yeah,
what we've done in the past 10 years.
We have some sort of base to go off, I guess, about what maintenance costs we would be looking at with frontage roads. Okay. So that's one of the questions again, what we asked them for, what is gonna be the maintenance cost to the city for everything we asked for? And then when it comes to the wetlands part, I guess I'm unclear. If they just construct the turnpike, what are they required to do as a basic to not cause harm to the environment around it and not cause harm to the lake? Like, what extra are we having to ask them for that they wouldn't already have to do, I guess is.
Well, actually, I think that, obviously, like I was saying, if they disturb the wetlands, and there's 3 criteria to be a wetland, so just because it's water, or just because there's nice plants there doesn't make it a wetland. It has to meet all 3 criteria: the soils, the hydrology, and the water availability to it, and the plant life that's there. So you have to meet all 3 of those criteria. If there's an area that meets those criteria, they have to mitigate it. And they will mitigate it whether we do this or not. What we're saying is, can we get a little bit extra? Like I said, can we, instead of using a concrete flume, can we use a Flexomat? In an area where we have a long slope, instead of just having it just drain down to the bottom, can we put in some just check dams that's gonna slow it down, allow the water to settle, slow it down, so we can get more of that aeration, some more of that contact time, some more of the biological treatment time that we can get to help remove contaminants that may be in there, especially your debris, dirt, rocks and that type of stuff. But that's the type of stuff that I would like to see us get in addition to what the minimum standard would be. Because they're gonna meet, and like I said, the Corps of Engineers, the last few projects we've done, we had to go 2 to 3 times over what we disturbed, especially when we looked at tree counts. For example, on the Main Street Bridge, we had to put down 4 times more trees than we took out. And we exceeded that, and we have to monitor that for 10 years to prove that those trees survive. It's very challenging when you have beavers in a river.
Sure.
So we're fighting that, but they will be held to those same type of standards. It was initially a 5-year, and the Corps of Engineers came back, that was an individual permit, and they came back and said, no, you gotta do 10 years. So that's kind of the minimum that they would have to do. And then, so we're trying to get a little bit extra. Can we do a little bit better?
Does it necessarily mean using more space, or is it just a difference in how they construct what they're already building? Is that what you're? So if we say we want these wetlands, does it mean they need to take more acres to do what we're asking, or we're asking them to construct what they're doing in a different way than what they standard might do?
I think that's all to be determined.
Okay.
That's what we need to be at the table to be able to have those discussions. If they were disturbed, and I'm just gonna use numbers, if they disturb an acre of wetlands, they're gonna have to put back probably 2 to 4 acres of wetlands to replace that. So that's just fact. But like I said, maybe we can do some different things. Maybe we can do, I don't want to throw in bioswales because that gets very engineering and takes some maintenance, but maybe we can do other things that help impact that on the way there too. So as far as just saying it's a if X then Y, we don't know yet. But there are some things that you can do that can enhance the way wetlands work. I'm not necessarily an expert in all of those. It's been a long time since I've been really dealing with that directly. But we definitely like to work with them on what can we do to improve. But as they get, and they have to do this, they're going to, whether we're at the table or not, they're gonna have to do that minimum mitigation for the wetlands.
And would we need to include details like these intersections, the frontage roads, do they need to be curb and gutter, or are they just
We
the
have that
ditch
in
like we
here.
have now? Okay.
We have that in here.
But they
And-
would pay for putting in lights, not us.
Well, and that's the thing, I don't think that we would look at all of them being as lights, because a lot of them, a 4-way stop or 3-way stop, whichever way you look at it, will be
That'd be
adequate.
my preference.
And a lot of them, yeah, I like the 2. But, so we don't know that they're all going to meet the warrants to put a light in. Now, certainly there are some we know will. I would expect, there's already lights at 60th and Indian Hills. I would expect that to be a signalized interchange. I would expect 36th, 12th Northeast, those, but I think the others won't have the traffic flow that they'll require them. They will put it in a manner that will be safe and consistent.
And even with the sidewalk or path, it's like on the Kilpatrick, there is I can't tell if it's 10 or 5, but there's a path continuously on the south side, but there is not at all on the north side, which is where the mall is, which is interesting, but there's no sidewalk at all on that side of it. So would we have to ask them to do that to make sure they actually did it?
Well, you gotta remember, a lot of the north section won't be in Norman city limits. So
Right.
that's part of the reason that I don't really, that would, I think, be up to those
The
jurisdictions.
Indian Hills Road area would be in the city limits.
Yeah,
of
and
Norman
we
already.
could request that through that section.
Well, I'm just
you know, we do
thinking
have,
about all the different details or things that if we're asking for stuff, if we don't ask for it, will it not get done?
Yeah.
Things that we expect to be done now, like continuous sidewalks, ADA compliant, all that type of stuff that, if we're asking, do we need to be sure we're asking for small details like that?
well, I mean, that's why we did put in, that we want them to consider the interchange at 36 Northwest to meet the current plans that we have. So that what we have called out and what was already in our planning stages will be included at that location also.
Okay. And then I think that was the main questions I had, just about if there is a resolution, like how fine of details do we need to include? And then one of them was some sort of action or clause where this is in here, this X amount of time has gone by and nothing has been done. It's not being done if this resolution is null and void, or I don't know, where you no longer have the council's support of, not even support, but just this resolution is meaningless if they don't have benchmarks of some kind.
I think that's where you would want to have that specifically put into a contract, because like we're talking about, a resolution really isn't something that's enforceable. What would be enforceable is an actual contract where you set out what we're supposed to do, what they're supposed to do, and we sign it and they sign it. That creates a legally enforceable obligation, and I think that's where you get into the details. Obviously difficult at this particular point to say in a particular section what type of lights are we gonna have. Are we gonna have ones that are over the road, we're gonna have ones on the side? I mean, those things, I think you would talk about it in the terms of a specific contract. And what Scott is saying is our engineering design criteria, that's why it's specifically referenced in there, because it has some of those specifics in there. So we can point to say this is what we're talking about.
Okay. And the comments about removing references to the north-south, because we have no idea where there's no plans, we don't know where it's gonna go. So should that be a separate resolution at some other time?
I think that we do, 21 kind of refers to that, basically saying that we recognize the SET with understanding the OTA has yet to set the final alignment. Once the SET project alignment is determined, the city requests the same input and discussions as those given for the East-West Connector project to ensure the needs of the city are met. This includes input for the locations of future interchanges, frontage roads, and potential wetland mitigation efforts. The city of Norman also requests ongoing communication for any future needs or requests as the OTA continues to develop this transportation infrastructure improvement in the Norman area. So basically, and that's, they acknowledge that they're working on that they don't know where it's gonna go right now. So we've tried to address that to state that we expect to come back with the south
Circumstances
extension.
may be different on that one.
Mhm.
Whatever in the future.
Right.
The council then may have different.
Right. For example, I don't know that frontage roads will be
Right.
a good idea on that one. I think that they are for this more urban section, but I don't know if they would be for that. I think that we can set some better parameters once we know where it's gonna be and what the impacts are.
Thanks, Scott. Henrik.
So, my constituents strongly oppose the turnpike because they and we all understand the risk to our watershed, Lake Thunderbird, and in Ward 3, the 10 Mile Flats. I have high concerns that the turnpike will act as a dam and the 10 Mile Flats doesn't really drain. So, given that this resolution should set the expectation and clearly identify what we expect, what we want them to follow, and set the standards. I like Hinkle's amendments on, like similar to what Councilmember Grant added to the eminent domain. Basically, all of his amendments that he has provided, it is concerning that we would move forward with this, given that we don't know the outcome of an audit. So I would like to see the language, keep it retained in the resolution that we strongly oppose the turnpike. But if you're going to do it, we have no power. So here are the things that we expect and hold them to the standard. And I do like the no-build alternative routes to be added in there, to be included. What else? And I think that is all, but I am highly concerned of the 10-mile flats, highly concerned of Lake Thunderbird.
Councilmember Grant.
Yeah, I was gonna ask, this is for Rick or maybe Scott, you might know, do we have examples of contracts with OTA and other municipalities and counties around turnpikes? And at what point the OTA and these cities or counties might have been approached to enter a contract?
I've seen one between the OTA and Oklahoma County, although I can't find it on Oklahoma County's website. I have seen a contract between OTA and Oklahoma County with regard to some of the issues that they dealt with.
And Councilmember Grant, in a conversation with City Manager Oklahoma City, asked him about issues, scenarios around turnpike development through Oklahoma city limits. And he said, in instances, the turnpike said, here's what we're planning to build. And the city said, if we give you some money, could you build some more of this for us? And they said, sure. I'm assuming there's some written document between Oklahoma City and the turnpike for those additional dollars from Oklahoma City's budget to the turnpike to build some additional
Like outlining
improvements. So,
each entity's fiscal responsibility.
yeah, and
to-
purchasing procedures and all
I
that
also
stuff.
suspect it wouldn't be too much different from the contract we have with regard to the project.
I'm also interested in that no-build alternative routes. Have they given that to anybody else? Do you know?
So that one more time?
Have they given that option to other folks at all? Has it been requested and
I've never heard that before, so I'm guessing
not?
we won't have seen that in any other agencies or requests.
Okay, those are my questions for right now. And I did see Councilmember Hinkle's hand up at one
Yeah,
point.
he's ready to
so,
go.
yeah.
Councilmember.
So one thing that I've seen that's a kind of a recurring theme is, especially with the Oklahoma City ask, is that there was nothing really in that ask. And in playing with an agency that tends to play by their own rules, as we've seen, I'm concerned that if we pass a resolution without putting a bunch of requests in it now, what would prevent them from rolling with the resolution that we pass now for the southbound portion of this and saying, hey, we already have our resolution, we're gonna go. So I'm viewing this as a one-shot opportunity to, if we have to have a resolution, if that's what we're gonna come to and that's gonna pass, then let's talk about things that are gonna protect our watershed. Let's talk about things that are gonna protect our residents and their properties. And again, I thank you for bringing up the audit, Councilmember Montoya. Just entering into not a partnership, but entering into a resolution with an entity that is currently under an audit. If we get halfway through or a third of the way through any of this and we find out that OTA's practices aren't lawful, or there's any just negative findings that come from that audit, then we've never been negotiating in good faith from the beginning. And so I would like to add that. I just want that to be something that we consider as an amendment to the resolution that we prepare, if we have any possibility to do that, to where if there's adverse findings within the audit that comes through and we're somewhere through this, then we get to go back and potentially negotiate again. Or we get to amend our resolution, or just anything that brings that good faith back to us.
You would always have the option of amending your resolution. I mean,
Okay.
right now, there's a resolution on the books that says council opposes the turnpike. This is a proposed amendment of that resolution, so you would always have the opportunity to come back with an amended resolution. Part of I think what I'm struggling with is the concept of, really right now, we're not negotiating.
No, I know,
We're just talking about
right.
what this council wants to express as its will with regard to this particular project. There may become a time in the future where there's negotiation, but if there's some determination that something OTA did or didn't do was unlawful, I mean, essentially, it would just void whatever those underlying agreements were.
Would they negotiate with us without this resolution?
It doesn't sound like it.
Okay,
And I
so
think
therefore,
I think it goes back to, one, that's their policy, number two, and then it goes back to the understanding that I think they believe they need a commitment from us that if we come to some agreement and they do something, like I said before, if they construct frontage roads, you would have to affirmatively accept them. Because, I mean, the thought process would be, what happens if they construct a frontage road and a subsequent council says, we're not gonna accept that first? Well, now we've got a section of roadway in the city of Norman that's gonna be maintained by them at their standard, which we don't know what is, and if it falls into a state of disrepair, is there anything we can do to force them to do something about it? And the answer might be, no, we really can't. So I think that's part of it. I mean, obviously, and I understand there's this somewhat of a lack of trust with regard to the OTA, but to some extent, we have to rely on their representations. If they don't follow through with their representations, like I said, the ordinance doesn't commit you to anything. What would really commit you to something would be a contract, and if somebody breaches a contract, then you do have judicial remedies with regard to that alleged breach. But again, you can come back and you can do a new resolution whenever you want to, based on facts that change. I mean, obviously, as we sit here today, we don't have any idea what the results of that audit is gonna be. And if there was some negative finding with regard to that audit, it would seem totally appropriate for this body to come back and say, we've changed our opinion. But again, just because you do the resolution doesn't commit you to anything.
Also in my amendment that I had done for the compensation to property owners affected by eminent domain, I'd like to add the Uniform Relocation Act language to that if
All
possible.
right, here's the difficulty I'm having with that.
Okay.
Under state and federal law, when the government takes somebody's property, they're entitled to just compensation. And just compensation is defined in the Oklahoma Constitution. And how it's determined is defined by the Oklahoma Constitution. Under the Constitution of Oklahoma, if the government takes property, the people that get to do the initial evaluation are three freeholders selected from a jury list determined by the legislature. If the landowner does not like that determination, then they have a right to have that determined by a jury. So that's how that issue is determined based on our Constitution. And this provision, you could ask for it, but I would doubt that OTA would agree to say that we're gonna give you something over and above what the Constitution says you're supposed to get. The other part, and Councilmember Grant and I talked about this yesterday, there is a provision in Title 63 that allows governmental entities to apply the Uniform Relocation Act to just compensation for property they're taking. Now, it's discretionary, it says may, but there is an administrative process whereby the property owner can request it. If that request is denied or they don't think that it was sufficient enough, there's an administrative appeal process. And if they're not happy with that process, then they can go to district court. There's also Oklahoma case law that says, as part of your just compensation under the Oklahoma Constitution, you can request relocation expenses. So your options are administratively under the provision Title 63, or if there was a condemnation case actually filed, part of your just compensation can be your relocation expenses.
But that doesn't include legal fees.
If there is a appraisal done by the freeholder. Once that appraisal is done, the property owner has a right to take the government has to deposit that money into court in order to take possession of the property. And as soon as that money is deposited into court, the property owner can take that money out without jeopardizing their right for a jury determination with regard to whether or not that appraisal was actually just compensation. If the jury determines that the award is 10% more than the appraisal, then that property owner would be entitled to their attorney's fees. So that's the mechanism that gets their attorney's fees, is if the jury determination is 10% more than what the appraisal was from the freeholders, then you would get your attorney's fees. And again, that mechanism, to me, I have always said, that mechanism would cause me, I'm putting in my relocation costs in that initial offer. If I get an offer from OTA, I'm gonna put in my relocation costs and submit to them a counteroffer that says, whatever I think my appraisal is plus my relocation expenses. And again, there's an administrative mechanism for that under state law. There's also a judicial mechanism for recovering your relocation cost. And I don't think we knew that before. I mean, that was something that Councilmember Grant and I talked about a little bit yesterday, was that issue. I did do that research and came up with, yeah, there's a statutory provision that specifically addresses those issues.
Yes, the process is they deposit the money. Money gets deposited in your bank account. It's not near the value of your property. You want to contest it, but you also have to get out of your house. So you have this amount that's less than what your property is worth that you're going to fight for the next 8 years to maybe win the case, maybe not.
So we can't bind future council to make a decision, or if we ask for frontage roads and they build them, we can't guarantee that a future council will agree to accept them. If staff, in 5 years, bad budget situation, staff says, well, it's gonna cost this much, and budget's bad, council says that we can't afford to take over the maintenance of these roads. What happens
I
then?
think you could bind the municipality through contract.
They could make the city do it.
Right. You could bind the municipality through contract. So if you did it, if you said you wanted this in a resolution, you came to an agreement, you executed a contract, that contract would bind the city, not necessarily that council.
Okay.
It would bind the city.
I think there are some general points of agreement. Those being on it's describing something about eminent domain and how that works. Relocation, don't know if that would work or not work, but if you say it doesn't make any difference that we put it in there. Was that Title 63? That's all I got.
Yes.
Title 63. And something about no build routes, things that have to go in there. And I really don't know how to phrase that, but we can put something in there. It just, if we're, this is my opinion. I'm doing what you tell me not to do, is be a liar.
We all do that.
It just seems to me if we're doing everything by the rules that are in front of us, the laws that are in front of us, we can't be busted for anything. If they're spending money incorrectly, it doesn't do with us. And we're already dealing with a thing, but we can put a statement in there, whatever makes you happy. What's the general feeling of council, or do we want to work this ordinance, work this resolution up and then sit on it for a minute, work this resolution up? No? What do you want to do? We can't vote.
I'm okay with seeing something. I'm okay with seeing something put together and making a decision.
Yeah, I would like to see us work on this language and bring it back, and if that's the sitting on part, discuss it a little more before we get to a potential vote.
Potentially, we could schedule that for pre-council conference before the 27th. Our target was the action item on the 27th as per the OTA's discussion of that 60% rule. And council, this is like so many decisions you make, this is a poker hand. Is 60% design real? Okay, we're just telling you what we were told. So if we think that 60% design is important to allow other activities to go on, then by all means. So we'll bring it back to you based on input from this evening at the pre-council conference of the 27th. You can choose to take action on it that night as part of the regular agenda off consent or not.
I know
And
it's,
we receive a draft of this prior to the
Soon
meeting.
as we can
Read it beforehand.
type this thing up, absolutely.
Okay, very good.
there are things, do you want to include the preamble, or do you want to change the preamble, or kick it out, or do anything like that? Does that make a difference? You want me to read it
It's a
again?
little long,
It's long?
yeah.
I like the first part where it says we don't want the turnpike here.
Now, that's all it is 2 sentences. That's,
Just short and
the rest of it was
First
me
couple sentences.
making it. What I wrote in that was the city of Norman does not welcome or endorse the intrusion of the turnpikes built by the Oklahoma Turnpike Authority into our community. Next sentence. We enter into this resolution because we are duty bound to comply with existing state law and Oklahoma Supreme Court rulings.
Perfect.
I don't know if that's entirely relevant. We're not making a resolution because we're duty bound by state law.
We don't
So
have to
why do
do
we,
So you're saying the first sentence?
so we can strike that part out?
Yeah, the first sentence.
Is that what you want? That's easy.
Now, we've all had a couple of weeks to digest my 33 amendments here. It'd be easier if we can just, anybody's narrowed down any that we want to remove.
There
I think-
are-
And I think that, in keeping with the spirit of a resolution, points that Mr. Knight has made about proper language to use, steering away from language like shall, because we can't really enforce that kind of thing, using the appropriate, request, I prefer demand, but if that's a little too aggressive for this council, then whatever. But that kind of language, updating probably need to take place. Other than that, did anybody see anything that was just terribly offensive?
Well, in section 3, I'd like to change that word seamlessly, the word uninterrupted. Just a personal thing. And I have a question.
I think that one's, seamlessly is struck out on, as one of my amendments.
Is it? Okay, I missed that. Thank you. Another thing. Yeah, that's right. Oh,
3
it's-
became 2.
You got it. Another thing is Councilmember Nash and I both came to is we don't have anything in here that says anything about the wetlands and the development of the wetlands and all the rest of that. And I think we need to discuss the idea of the intermodal trail that is proposed in here. If it doesn't hurt anything, in my opinion, if it doesn't take another rooftop, according to this picture, it takes 3. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
we typically are able to build those within our, when we do a new roadway, we do 100-foot wide right-of-way. Most of that's roadway, and we still have enough room to be able to build a 10-foot trail on one side and a 5-foot sidewalk on the other. On Rock Creek Road, we actually have 10-foot trail on both sides. You can look at the examples of that. You can look at Rock Creek Road. We got it on both sides. 24th, we have it on the east side. 36, it's on the east side. And you can also look at Highway 9, where they didn't have to go out and obtain, except maybe a couple of really weird little locations, anything extra to keep it within the right-of-way. I would be very shocked and surprised if there was, judging by some of the information that was actually provided by Councilmember Nash, that there would be any need for any additional right-of-way to put this in. I think it would fit seamlessly within what we have now. There's more than enough property to put it in there. And I just think it would be a really good amenity for the public. But if council feels it's not, we can strike it and move forward.
Councilmember Pinkham.
Yeah, I think it's important to include, I'd love to see 10-foot multimodal paths all over Norman, not just in this location. But I'd also like to see some language included in there that says, whereas this gets included in the project, it doesn't condemn any additional homes. Basically just, say, we want this included, assuming it doesn't cause further damage. So, I'd like to see it remain in there, but obviously, if it takes even one house, then we shouldn't include it, but.
I would agree. It could be an asset to the
I
house,
think so.
but making screening that's pretty and stuff like that. in years to come. Yes. Oh, I'm sorry.
I was gonna say, and if you look at, I mean, some of the great trails that I've seen, and some of them that I've actually used are along turnpike systems. You can go along Wichita, Kansas, all along the turnpike. They've got a beautiful trail that every time I go through there, I see people on bicycles and running. There's also a lot of them along the creek and along some of the others, Tulsa. There's a lot of places where you can see it incorporated along major transportation, and it works really well. You know, I'll be honest with you, I wish we'd go over the bridges and never even have to get in contact with the local roadways, but that's not really the option that we have available.
Yes, sir.
I would like to remind this council of the tale of the monkey's paw and asking the OTA for a sidewalk. How much would the sidewalk cost if we were to do it ourselves?
I'm sorry, I don't have that number off the top of my head.
What's the trail on Highway 9?
That's the thing, I just can't get that number in my head. I look at so many projects in a month and a week to keep specific numbers on a project. That was done by our transportation group, or traffic, not by the engineering side, so I'm not very familiar with that project, as well as some of the ones on 24th and 36th. So those weren't done by our engineering group. The new flood is also done by the engineer, or done by the traffic group, so I just haven't done
Our
it.
finance director said a mile on Flood was $600,000.
Okay, I thought I remember hearing a mile on Highway 9 was $1 million, if I remember, just for, yeah. So somewhere between, to answer your question, somewhere between $600,000 and $1 million for a mile, so it's real money.
Yeah, I'd be hesitant on, if that's the one and only thing that we're asking them for, or dreaming that they give us as an amenity, I think that, we'd be safer to leave it off. But I feel like I'm in the minority in this, on this opinion.
I'm sorry. Well, let me answer him before. I'll be rude. How about that? My thought is if it can be there and be an attractant to people, to get out and move and do the things that those are supposed to do, and stay within not taking homes, it would make me nuts. I would frankly like never to see a service road on a highway, because we have to take that extra footage. And that's more homes, that's more everything else. But the reality is Indian Hills is already there, and it shouldn't move much farther. If we have to move farther south of Indian Hills, how much is enough? And that's a hard question.
Scott, in terms of Indian Hills in its current location, do we see, because it seems like development to the north Indian Hills is virtually non-existent, from I-35 west. I didn't see anything that gave me an indication they were taking houses on the south side of Indian Hills. Did you see anything that indicated?
Not west of I-35. I think there was some structures as you get further out between 48th and 60th. There's that I know that the 45th Infantry was using it for a while. It's been a construction company. It's been some other items.
There's some
That
metal
was,
buildings on the north
more of a
side.
commercial warehouse type of structure.
Well, let me, put it in this way. In this list in our resolutions, let's stick to needs instead of just amenities, because it kind of trivializes everything else that we're asking for.
I mean, I can see a logic behind that. I think I just share the mind that, this is our one-shot task for everything, so we might as well get it all out on the table. But again, I'm one vote, so I'm not gonna act like that's gospel or anything. I'm sorry, I didn't see who was first, Councilmember Dixon.
On the Nash resolution, I mean, I think we should unstrike the original 2, 7, and 8. I think 7 has to be there. That's us saying, here's where we would like the stuff.
They're already in the designs though. Like it's been in the design since his release in February 2022.
So then it won't matter. Let's leave it in there. And like 8 needs to be in there. So does 2. I mean, if we look at I think that one of the biggest ask for the citizens in this AIM process for recreation, that kind of stuff, is a trail system. And that's what this 10-foot multimodal path provides, is part of the greater trail system. So I think the 10-foot multimodal path needs to stay, as long as it doesn't take out any extra homes.
Councilmember Holman?
So just, if we don't ask for the frontage roads, they're not gonna build them. Does that mean that the right-of-way that they would need is less? I know Indian Hill Road, two-lane road is there currently, but they'd be building a new multiple-mile-long frontage road on the north side of the turnpike. If we're not asking for it and they don't build it, then is their right-of-way acquisition less? And if we don't have frontage road, then it means the area is not economically developable like it is on the Kilpatrick, and we don't have to worry about the urban runoff and all that issue. It
So,
would just be a highway through a rural area with there wouldn't be strip malls and all that stuff up against it. It would just be fields. If we don't ask for a frontage road.
correct. The AIM Steering Committee in their efforts to try to identify where 23,000 additional housing units fit between now and 2040, they recognize the spots on both sides of Indian Hills as providing opportunity for multifamily, high-density residential that would be considered transit-oriented development with a frontage road. Without the frontage road, you wind up putting traffic into more out of what you might develop on the north side of that east-west turnpike. Now, that absolutely may not make any sense on the north-south alignment, because you really don't have the way to sewer out there, or we don't have the water infrastructure on the north-south. So those frontage roads would be much less important for what your 2040 comprehensive land use plan looks like. I think the ability to develop on north of Indian Hills, west of I-35, you're not heavy into the WQPZ real estate like you see east of I-35 on that Indian Hills alignment. So you may need that real estate just to help meet your housing objectives in that comprehensive land use plan, and the frontage road makes those viable for high-density residential development.
So we've already, this council over a number of years has already approved final, or not, maybe not final, but plats for all of north of Indian Hill Road between Norman and Moore, or between the Moore city limit and Indian Hill Road. There is no public transit in that area. There's no proposed public transit that I know of in the AIM plan for that area. There's no proposed train stop in that area. So why would a turnpike be necessary for transit-oriented development when there is no transit that's gonna be there? Like a 4-lane Indian Hill Road could support high-density development the same
Correct.
as a frontage road would. So why would the turnpike be necessary, or frontage roads be necessary for us to have high-density development in that area anyway, even if it's just the way it is now?
Well, because
Other than it's already been, we've approved single-family and some multi.
in some of it,
Yeah.
the ability to exit the neighborhood going south further into Norman, as opposed to exiting the neighborhood going to Telephone Road or 36th, 48th, 60th, without a way to make your way back into Norman. You're basically any high-capacity transportation infrastructure would qualify development as transit-oriented. So, yeah, a 4-lane arterial, absolutely, rail, highway, all of those infrastructure types would say that is transit-oriented development. If you don't have frontage roads on the north side, you basically, at the property line, you've got an embankment and a turnpike with no way to access it. Potentially without those frontage roads, that's where the on and off ramps would connect, and you've just cut off that part of Norman from being able to access that major transportation corridor.
And the OTA would want to not have those connections. I mean, what I'm kind of getting at is, we have Indian Hill Road now, but if we ask for frontage roads on both sides, are they going to acquire more right-of-way to build the frontage road on the north side? And and if we don't ask for it, if they don't do it, then we reduce our urban footprint in that area maybe, but
Potentially,
I
yeah,
don't
your ability to develop it in terms of high.
mainly I just kind of feel like
density
they're
residential.
going to build them both, or they're going to build one on the north side of the road, even if we don't ask for it. But if we do ask for it, are they gonna take more property to do it, is kind of what I'm getting at, I guess.
Well, the ones on the north side of the road being more,
Well,
most of the way.
depends, the,
Yeah.
you know, the Norman city limit is on the other side of the Icon and Bob Moore Cadillac, and so the whole turnpike is gonna be in the Norman city limits. It's not hardly even gonna touch the Moore city limits, it doesn't appear. So I could see that, I mean, till we see some other alignments, that north side frontage road could very well be all in Norman city limits, and then we do get to maintain all of it ourselves. Those are just some of the questions I have. Again, the same thing with the trail, I do think if it's not taking any more right-of-way and they're gonna be building a 5-foot sidewalk, I don't see the harm really in asking for a 10-foot sidewalk, as it would help complete our network, but cautious about asking for frontage roads if it does mean that they're doing more right-of-way than what they would if they didn't do them. And if we have concerns about urban development on the Little River and stuff, do we want to encourage more development there to meet our housing goal or not?
And I think they're different for each leg.
Yeah.
This way, east-west is a different set of parameters than north-south, because one of the things that I'm hoping, if this turnpike does go through, is that we can get ambulances to people quicker. And that 5 minutes or 10 minutes makes a heck of a difference. And so, as we look at that, if we don't put in frontage roads, which I don't really want them, it doesn't matter what I want, it'll be 5 to 6 councils from now. What they want, they want to stick a bunch of McDonald's out there, that to me would be horrible. But if we're using that as just a quicker way of getting through there, and being able to get to people with medical help.
I guess I'm asking too, if they construct the north frontage road and we don't ask for it, then are we under any obligation to ever take over maintaining it? So if they build stuff that we don't ask for, are we under obligation to take over
And I think
maintenance?
that issue goes back to the fact that in order for you to be able to have to maintain it, council has to accept it. It's just like any other development. If you do a plat and a developer comes in and constructs a roadway, when council accepts that final plat, you notice on the agenda, it always says, and the public dedication. Because that is the mechanism that makes the city responsible for maintenance. This is a little bit different because it's not necessarily a plat, but that frontage road would still have to be dedicated to and accepted by council for the city to have the obligation to maintain it. If you don't accept it, the city doesn't have the obligation to maintain it.
But you were saying earlier that if we ask for it and they do it, then we would be potentially contractually obligated, the city, not the
I
council.
said if you ask for it, you can ask for it.
Yeah.
And then if I'm OTA, once you ask for it, once I commit to doing it, I want you to sign a contract saying that once I do this, you're going to accept it. And then if you don't accept it, if I build it and you don't accept it, then my remedy is over in district court.
So if we pass this resolution with our list of requests in it that we're asking for, and they agree, then they're gonna ask us to sign a contract, which would require them to follow through with them too?
It would require them to follow through. I mean, the purpose of a contract is to allocate risk. So essentially, they're saying, they're risking building it and you not accepting it, you're risking them not building at all.
Okay, thanks.
Further thoughts from council?
So on the amendments that I had proposed, I think Councilmember Dixon suggested that we unstrike sections 2, 7, and 8. And if that's consensus, and were there any other of the amendments?
I'd like to see Councilmember Engel's amendments looked here. And also language that calls for a contract upon execution or signing of this resolution.
You know, we do have somebody in the audience that can tell us about what Oklahoma County had with their frontage roads, if that would be, it'd be okay to,
Let's, because we did see that up on the board, and I think we understand what you're saying. Television screen, one, dating myself.
Yes.
I see opportunity for some of Hinkle's amendments, especially around the eminent domain and housing. I see in Councilmember Nash's, it's kind of addressed in item 21 and 22. No, 21. And I think some of the requests about protecting the watershed also have overlap.
Yeah, my amendment based on the water studies was mostly just to start a discussion about it, but respectfully, I think Councilmember Nash's research and knowledge on it is far superior than mine, so I would leave mine as just a discussion item and yield that amendment to further,
Like all references to water.
yeah.
Okay, and then I guess some of it, I see where you're saying is like discussion, cause it's not something, you know, I was curious about this tribal part. Did you see that?
Yes. Here's the difficulty with that. There's a difference between Indian country and property owned by Native American. I'm a member of the Muskogee Creek Nation. I own a house in Northeast Norman, so I am a tribal member. But my house is not Indian country. Indian country is property owned by the tribe that has been declared Indian country by the Bureau of Indian Affairs. So, one, I'm not totally certain we have the ability, or OTA has the ability, to eminent domain property in Indian country anyway. And if they were, I suspect they'd have to go through the BIA, and there's a whole nother level of, I suspect there is a whole nother level of red tape, so to speak, with regard to doing that to begin with.
To our knowledge, that the proposed alignments don't really go through any Native American lands.
I haven't looked, but I would assume that they would be paying attention to that. But the difficulty for us is, we don't have the ability to establish federal court jurisdiction. I don't know, number one, again, just compensation defined under the Oklahoma Constitution and the federal Constitution. But if you have adequate remedies at state law, you don't get to go to federal court. So because you have eminent domain proceedings, not only brought by the municipality, but if the municipality takes your property and doesn't file eminent domain, you can file an action in inverse condemnation. You have to go through those remedies before you can even go to federal court. You have to establish, you went through state court, you didn't get just compensation, and now I want to go to federal court to establish that my constitutional rights were violated. So the difficulty for us is, I think there's a little bit of a concern with regard to how you're defining what's Indian country, because that's a totally separate issue from property owned by a Native American. And I'm pretty certain we can't tell the federal court what they have to look at. I mean, we just don't have the ability to tell federal courts what they have to do or not do.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and, you know, just wanted to hit the points that were presented in his set of amendments.
The other part that may go with that is, I suspect there's a possibility that if it had something to do with tribal property, you'd have to go to tribal court. They might have it. I mean, I know, I used to teach Indian country jurisdiction for the police academy. I know federal courts have criminal jurisdiction in Indian country for certain acts by non-Native Americans. And they have criminal jurisdiction for certain acts by Native Americans. I think civil jurisdiction in Indian country is in tribal court.
Hypothetically speaking, if a person that was a member of the tribe were to deed their property over to a tribal entity and trust, would that take care of that?
I think it'd still go back to the issue with the BIA. As long as, I mean, the Bureau of Indian Affairs has to come in, designate your property as Indian country. And once that happens, any transfers or anything that happens to that property, you're gonna have to get approval from the BIA. And again, I looked really quickly to see if I could find the question of jurisdiction for eminent domain in Indian country, and it pulled up absolutely nothing. But it's a somewhat educated guess that there's a whole nother level of red tape if you were talking about trying to eminent domain Indian country that you'd have to go through, and that would involve the federal government.
Mr. Nayton, as it relates to the very last elements in the amended resolution, that staff are directed to deny any and all permits to, prior to an approved environmental impact statement following NEPA. What, based on our
It's not
permits,
enforceable, is it?
I don't think it is, based on what our permits are.
Here's what concerns me more than anything is Article 3, Section 6 of our charter prohibits council from giving directives to anybody that's your subordinate. That's one of the reasons there was in the first part of this action, it used to say the city attorney, the city manager, and the public works director. And I struck the public works director because he's your subordinate. So council could give you a directive, council could give the city attorney a directive because we're your employees. You couldn't give a directive to somebody subordinate to the city manager. Now, as a practical matter, if you tell Daryl to do something, Daryl's gonna tell Scott, and that's gonna happen. But the concept of this directing staff to deny permits seems to be directed more to staff that's subordinate to Daryl as opposed to council's employees. And the difficulty is a violation of it's a violation of Article 3, Section 2 of the charter for council to give a directive to somebody subordinate to city manager. And the remedy for that is removal from office. So this is me trying to keep you guys from that. The difficulty that we've been talking about as it relates to NEPA processes, NEPA studies are really done by the federal government. I mean, it's a federal agency that is proposing a project, or there's some project that involves federal funding. For example, for highway, it's the Federal Highway Safety Administration. They're the ones that do the NEPA study, not the contractor, or not the entity that's constructing it. So the difficulty for us is we can't force the federal government to come in and do a study because we tell them to. We talked about that with Councilmember Grant, and I talked about that with Scott. She said, cool, can we ask them? I said, sure, we can ask them. But it just goes back to, there is a database online for federal NEPA studies in Oklahoma that goes back to 1987. There's one that involves a roadway, and it's the Crosstown Expressway in Oklahoma City, because that project involved federal funds. So the difficulty is they're very involved. They generally require, there is a process by where citizens can have input, they can have questions, that have to be published in the Federal Register. We just don't have the ability to do any of that stuff. So the difficulty for us is, quite frankly, if we said staff has to deny permits based on you presenting a NEPA EIS study, we wouldn't ever be issuing any permits, because the only time that those get done are done by federal agencies, not state agencies.
And Rick, just for clarification, as we're putting together the next version of the document for council to consider, so where we are describing in this resolution, the OTA must, or the OTA will, or the OTA shall, should it be worded in such a way that the city of Norman is requesting that the OTA X, Y, and Z?
Yes.
Because we have the ability to request everything and the ability to require not much of anything. So I wouldn't want anybody to be shocked if they see language and the must and the will aren't there, but it says we are requesting that you do X, Y, Z.
Is there a stronger word than request?
Somewhere between request and.
I'm trying to put as much muscle into this thing as possible, and so Request seems like we're.
Insist. I looked it up in the dictionary, it's stronger than it sounds legally, but usually a request doesn't make much of a heck of a difference. If there's another word, that would be, I would request too in this, Councilmember Nash, I think it's 22, that there's some, in language, yes, it's 22, in the red line. OTA recognizes this as largest displacement. Can we just start that at center of the OTA agrees to work in good faith with banking institutions? And just remove that language. And any language that has to do with us, it's 22 in the red. And then the other ones would be where we refer to, and I can't find it in here, COMCD, Midwest City and Del City, because we don't have the right to talk about them. Yeah.
We already removed that. That was a request of COMCD, was to remove that language.
Okay.
And we'd already agreed with them to do that. We just didn't have time to get that incorporated before it came to council.
I never agreed, but I couldn't find it in there when I was trying to miss it. Anything else from council?
I just looked up request on a thesaurus.
What's it say?
Potential substitution might be calls for, instead of request, the city of Norton calls for. It's really the only one in here that seems to fit, that has a stronger inclination than request. Yeah, require, demand.
Yeah.
That's plead, we're not pleading. Okay.
All right. Anything else? Well, council, thank you for your work, and staff as well. Thank you for doing, and for the audience, thank you for taking the time to work on it.